Hello and welcome to this episode of the Chicken Yogi Show. I blogged recently about a project that was a yard project that I had, one of those projects, that you think every time you walk past it, you think, oh, I should take care of that. Oh, I should take care of that. And for a variety of reasons, the project in total took me a couple, maybe 3 or 4 hours, but I spread it out over several days. But it was one of those projects that had been on my mind for close to, I'd say, like 6 or 7 years. And a variety of things, a variety of reasons, the big burnout that I've talked about contributed to that project not being completed. Well, it's done. And I blogged about some of the emotions surrounding it because it was really kind of eye-opening to me. The more I thought about that project and how I felt about it, the more I realized those emotions carry over into other areas of my life. And it really kind of opened up the door as to that emotion and how that emotion works in our neurodivergent brains. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about this week. And that is the emotion of shame. Shame is something that a lot of neurodivergent people feel because of our executive functioning issues. We always think we should do something, we should be working on something, we could do better, we could do more of something. If as somebody with ADHD, if I could only get into a routine, I could, exercise more or whatever. And all of that comes with shame. And something I've realized with that project is that shame comes from other people's expectations of us. Shame is something that is generated when we are disconnected from ourselves. And I want to talk a lot about that this week. And I know I just kind of dove right into a very serious topic. But on one hand, I'm very excited to share this information with you because I feel like it will help you the way it helped me to work through it. But also because it is so important when we think about living our authentic lives, the stories we tell ourselves, our spirituality. There's a lot of shame that can come from all of that. So let's talk a bit about shame this week and dive in and see what we can do. This is the Chicken Yogi Show, hosted by the Chicken Yogi, Kit Kilstow. Kit is a spiritual mentor who shares spiritual wisdom to help neurodivergent people remember who they are. They believe that we all deserve full liberation and radical self-acceptance and love. Learn more and receive a free gift when you subscribe at chickenyogi.com. And now, this week's show. I want to begin this week by talking about what shame is and defining it, because shame has different feelings in the body, and shame may come with anxiety. It may come with the emotions of wanting to hide, wanting to be invisible, not wanting to be seen. And you may not realize that shame is actually driving all of that. That was true in my case. So as I do when I do some of these podcasts, I've gone out to my trusty Oxford dictionary, dictionary of the words. And shame, they have it defined as a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. And I feel like that is not quite the correct definition. I mean, no shade to the Oxford Dictionary of Language. No shade to those people who make it their job to define the word. But I feel like that definition of shame comes out of a pathology or a belief that if you're feeling shame, it has to be because you've done something wrong. And we could get into, oh goodness, probably an entire series of podcasts about what is wrong, who defines what wrong is, who sets the rules, who defines the rules. The bottom line of that is if you feel ashamed of something. So if you can't afford the latest fashions, if you have a very serviceable car, but not a new car or a shiny car, you might, or if your car has a loud muffler, because you can't afford to get it fixed, you might feel shame around that. And the reason why is because society, or they, some nebulous they, someone is going to feel like you've done something wrong because you can't afford nice clothes, or because you can't afford to get your car fixed. In the case of a lot of neurodivergent people, and something that I've been diving into because of my upbringing, as well as just wanting to kind of get a handle on things, would be like housework. If your house is cluttered. So like I'm looking at my desk right now, and I've got a stack of papers, including my notebook where I do like my menus and my grocery lists. And, I got a stack of papers here. I've got some plushy stuffed animals that I hug when I need to. I've got all the usual desk stuff. I got scissors. I got a box of pencils and pens. I've got a couple keyboards because I work on a couple of computers. You get the idea. There's a big clear space because that's where the cat usually sprawls. And the cat clears the space if it's not left clear, as cats are wanting to do. So, but I look at my desk, or I look at my office, and it's cluttered. And I feel shame about that, because I should have a neat desk. If I am on video, I blur my background because I feel like I should have, the plant and the picture and the perfect zoom background. As opposed to what I have behind me, which is, my My Little Ponies and Briar collection, and bookshelves stuffed full of books, with more books added to it from graduate school, from finishing my semester this spring. Lots and lots of books. Not ashamed of lots and lots of books. Do not be ashamed of having lots and lots of books. But it's not, it's not Instagram worthy. It's not, Decorator magazine worthy. And so because of that, I kind of feel like people might be judging me based on my background. And I've had people tell me that, no, it's cluttered, but one, you're neurodivergent, and clutter kind of comes with that territory. But also it tells us a lot about you. There's the My Little Ponies that I had. There's my Briar horses that I collect and I use kind of as inspiration in my writing, that sort of thing. So I think that's important, though, that shame comes from outside of ourselves. We are getting some signal, whether real or perceived. We believe that some other person is going to place an action on us, some past judgment on us, and that's what's driving the shame. And once I realized that, it changed everything. And so I'm going to be really vulnerable here with you for a moment and share a story of just how much realizing that shame comes from outside, that it's other people's expectations, and that I've done absolutely nothing wrong. So, like I said, I'm neurodivergent. My house is cluttered. I have a lot of stuff made worse because of a couple of family members going into assisted living, and basically I was the one to help them, and they were like, here, you need all this stuff. And I was like, no, not really, but okay. I don't say no to family. And so they packed it all into my SUV, and I brought it down here. And then my mother had a lot of stuff. And I sent a lot of that stuff when Mom passed away to thrift stores, but there was quite a bit that I was like, kind of, these little trinkets, these little statues, all this stuff, oh yeah, those are cute. I should keep those. So suffice to say, we have a little house, a lot of stuff. House is cluttered. Also, I'm involved in my projects. My spouse is involved in his projects. And there are just some things that are not high on our priority list. Because of this, we have had a couple of home repair issues that have been outstanding. And I have been mortified for somebody to come to my house because I grew up with extreme clutter, extreme hoarding, And I remember I talked about it in the blog. I remember, my aunts coming in to quote unquote clean. And I think I've talked about it on a previous podcast. And so I have these vivid traumatic memories of all of this. And I was mortified. And I realized, and I talked about it when I reviewed the book, How to Keep House While Drowning. I realized, hey, there's no moral failing in not having a perfect, television, Instagram worthy house. Very few people have that, especially if you have animals. I have cats. Dog owners understand that dogs are dogs, and you do have to clean up after them. Likewise, cats are cats. You do have to clean up after them. And children are children. You have to clean up after them. And so, there's no moral failing in having a messy house. And so I finally worked up the courage to make the call to have the home repair issue resolved. And I just said, look, I have been through hell the last few years. The house is what it is. We're working on it. I'm very sorry. And I probably shouldn't have even apologized. But everybody I have said that to who has come to do work on our house as we're trying to catch up on deferred maintenance has been, hey, no problem. And I suspect, not to give into too much to stereotypes, but where I live, I suspect I'm not the only person with a house that is not going to appear in Better Homes and Gardens. So that was kind of my journey with shame. So I want to kind of, now that you've heard about that in action, I want to kind of peel back those layers. So what does it take for us to feel shame? Well, it takes a situation. It takes the stories we tell ourselves about that situation, and that is very important. It takes the stories we think others are telling about that situation, whether they're true or not. And it takes some sort of moral judgment. And so I want to unpack that a little bit, because I feel like for a lot of us, especially those of us who are neurodivergent, on one hand, we are taking in a lot of stories that other people are telling about us, whether that's about the neurodivergent community as a whole, the stories coming from the pathology paradigm of psychology, whether that stories coming from friends or relatives, well-meaning or not. And in a great many cases, the people who are telling these stories don't mean to hurt us. They feel like they're doing us a favor, but what they're doing is they're basically scooping up a load of their judgment and shoveling it onto us. And so they think they're telling us something good. They think they're doing us a favor. They're protecting us by telling us these things. But what they're really doing is they're showing their own cards and how they feel about situations. And I think that's important. A phrase that I repeat to myself damn near every day is, no one can make you feel inferior without your permission. I believe that's attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt. The other one is, it is none of your business what other people think of you. And so, that combined with my belief that, hey, we're all just human people trying to, go through this journey together and trying to have compassion for ourselves and one another, and let's be kind to one another. That's kind of become my motto in the last several years. But really, the last couple of years, as I've come out of the burnout, that's really shifted my personality and how I think about things. But, when you think about those four pieces of the puzzle, the situation, and it doesn't matter whether it is, trying to get up earlier every morning. It could be something like that. It could be, cleaning your house. It could be, starting a new exercise routine, whatever that situation is. This was a point made by that book, How to Clean House When You're Drowning, which I, again, did a really deep dive into as far as a book review. And the thing to remember is that none of these situations have morals attached to them. They're all morally neutral. The only situations, as far as I'm concerned, that would have morals attached to them would be how you treat yourself and how you treat other people. But whether your desk is cluttered or not, there's no morals attached to that. That is neither, good nor bad. That is neither positive nor negative. It simply is. My desk is cluttered, my office is cluttered. I have a lot of stuff. There's no moral judgment attached to that. So once we look at the situation and we look at the situation in isolation and realize that we are the stories that we tell ourselves about this situation, about what's going on, and the stories that we are picking up, whether consciously or unconsciously, real or perceived, about what other people are saying about the situation, that's when the morals get attached. But it's little everyday to day stuff that we feel shame about, not cleaning out your car. There's nothing wrong with not cleaning out your car. I would love to show you pictures of my car with the hay in it because I have to haul hay for my horses. And so I haul hay in my SUV. If you get into my SUV, you will find hay. And there's nothing, I would almost say that that's morally good because I'm feeding my horses. But whether it's fast food bags, old newspapers, or whether it's hay, it doesn't matter. There's no moral judgment attached to any of that. So that's step one. Look at the situation and understand that it exists outside of moral judgment. It simply exists, and it's okay that it exists. Step two would be, what stories are we telling ourselves about this? And this is where it can be difficult to unpack these stories, and it may take a while. I mean, it took me a long, long time to understand where a lot of my shame was coming from. And once I did, I was like, oh, wow, that goes back a long way. So what stories are you telling yourselves? And then I think we need to go back to, is it true and is it kind? So I tell myself, I'm not, doing this 1 yard chore because I'm lazy. Well, is it true? No. For one, lazy is a judgment. And two, I am certainly not lazy when you look at everything I'm doing. It simply was not a priority for me because I was busy taking care of other things. So once you look at that story, or, me with letting repair people into the house, oh, that's where that is coming from. Now, for me, my shame about my house wasn't wrapped up in shame that I could recognize. It was all wrapped up in anxiety, in stress, and it was wrapped up in the question of what other people would think. And I didn't even recognize that as shame until I really started kind of churning it over and poking at it and going, oh, that's shame. So I think when you look at the stories you tell yourself, you then need to flip over and say, well, what stories have others told you at any point in your life about this situation? And so you may come back to, as a childhood, maybe somebody said something. As a child, maybe there were things that other people said to you about things you wanted to do. Those stay with us, even if something was said to you as a child that you don't have an actual memory of. Once you're like, oh yeah, I think that was said to me as a child, even though I can't remember the exact instance, then you realize that that's where the judgment is coming from. And I can tell you, shame is always judgment coming from someone else that you are either picking up or echoing. And again, rightly or wrongly, the judgment may not be coming from anyone. You may just be thinking, oh God, people will think this. The Zoom background. I'm thinking, oh my God, everybody's looking at my Zoom and they think, oh, what a horrible person. And the truth is, everybody I've mentioned it to went, oh no, I like seeing your personality. I like seeing, your My Little Pony collection, which is usually what gets the most comments. I've just got a few of them left in the view and stuff. And so once you realize that those stories may not actually be told about you, once you realize that those stories may not actually be said, that there's something that your mind is kind of, I don't want to say made up, but that your mind is imposing on the situation. So we've got the situation we've looked at that's morally neutral, that's, has no value judgment attached to it. And we've looked at the stories that we told ourselves. We've looked at the stories that other people told us. And the final piece of that is moral judgment, which I've been talking about all along. But it takes either ourselves or other people applying a moral value judgment onto the situation. And it is from that moral judgment where shame comes from. So again, going back to this pathologized definition, a painful feeling. And I think that's important. It may not be, it could be physically painful. It could, you could have an upset stomach, kind of a fast heartbeat when you think about it, those typical signs of anxiety. You may not always understand that shame does not have its own body markers or physical markers. It could for you, but as naming our emotions can be difficult as neurodivergent people, that painful feeling could be any different thing of humiliation or distress. And so I want to focus on just the distress part of that definition, because obviously if you're experiencing any sort of anxiety symptoms, a fluttering heartbeat, if you're experiencing, a kind of a growly, upset, turny stomach, those aren't positive things to feel. They are distressing. And it's the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. And again, I don't like that verbiage, consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. I think it's more the idea that whatever's going on is having judgment passed upon it. And so that moral judgment, and if it's a positive moral judgment, we generally don't feel shame about it. So it's generally a negative or distressing or upsetting feeling, that it's the feeling of wrong, that we're doing something wrong, that we're doing something bad. And for many neurodivergent people, because we have been told for a vast majority of our lives that whatever we're doing, thinking, feeling in the moment is wrong, how we're expressing ourselves is wrong, the words we choose are wrong, this feeling that whatever we're doing is wrong is what really causes that shame. And it can be difficult in the moment when you have those thoughts that pop up, that feeling. And for me, that's a feeling of I'm going to get in trouble. And I always know there's very definite for me, because it's tied into my anxiety and frankly tied into the diagnosable anxiety disorder. It's this constant feeling that I'm going to get in trouble because somebody doesn't like what I'm saying or doing, or I'm making the wrong choices. Because again, that's the message that even not being diagnosed as neurodivergent, somebody, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 48 as neurodivergent. And so because of that, there was just that constant throughout my life, that drumbeat of everything I'm doing is wrong because that's what everybody else said. And so for me, that's where a lot of my shame comes from. And that may be the case for you too. It may not be. In speaking with my partner, who's also neurodivergent, even though he grew up very differently than I did, in many ways, our traumas are very similar. Again, not realized as neurodivergent. And there's just this pervasive feeling that whatever he's doing is wrong. And again, it's different ways and different things. Because our upbringings were totally different. It's very interesting sometimes when we talk, because it's like the way we were raised is like a total 180 degree from one another. But again, there's that pervasive feeling of we're doing something wrong. We're not making the quote unquote correct choices. When really the truth is we're all making the best choices we can in the moment. And that's the compassionate way to look at it. And the compassionate way to look at it is we're all doing the best we can with what we have at any given moment in time. And so I think that's where I want to leave this. I mean, I have spent almost 25 minutes talking about shame, which is, something that can bring up a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings, especially again as a neurodivergent person. And so where I want to leave this for you is that all of this comes from the stories that we have told ourselves because of what other people have told us as far as their stories. And so it's important to remember that the stories that other people are telling us come from their experiences, their beliefs. It is them trying to impress their thoughts and feelings upon you. Just as, let me be honest, me talking to you through this podcast, I'm trying to impress my thoughts and feelings on you, hopefully to help you be kinder and gentler to yourself. That is certainly my goal here. Maybe think about some things and understand that you are perfect, you are good just the way that you are. And you just existing right now in this time-space continuum is an amazing feat. And when we think about that and think about how we're all connected, and our stories are one way that connects us. When we think about all that, then it's easy to understand why we feel shame about things, but I think we should also examine that shame and make sure that we are not taking on moral judgments about things that don't need moral judgments at all. That we are not comparing ourselves to others, that we are not taking on the traumas of, say, like, our mothers, our parents, the people around us, that we remember that we're doing the best we can with what we're given at any given moment in time. And my best isn't going to look like your best, and it's not going to look like your mother's best or anybody else's best, your boss's best. And that's because we all have different capacities, all different resources. We're all different. And how the interlocking pieces of our lives come together, it's a different mosaic or a different kaleidoscope for each one of us. And so if my hope for this podcast is, if by talking a little bit about shame, if I can help you to understand it a bit more, maybe examine it a bit more, and maybe help you release it a bit more, or alleviate you of having to carry the burden of shame, then that would be my goal. If you have any questions about this, if you have any thoughts or any feelings, I really encourage you to reach out. My virtual door is always open. I also want to remind you to, if you like what I'm talking about here, if you're interested in learning more, go ahead and like, subscribe, follow on your favorite podcast platform. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, you name it, we're probably there. And if we're not there, let me know, because I want to make sure that we are where you listen. I also want to encourage you. I'm recording this. It's, still the first part of June of 2024. And I am hoping by the middle of the month to start doing some community yoga classes. And in doing so, my goal again is not to push the dogma of yoga or some sort of cure narrative, but just to help us recenter ourselves, get into our bodies, maybe move our bodies a bit more. A lot of the neurodivergent people I know get very stuck in their head. And so yoga helps me and it helps them come down into their bodies and inhabit their bodies and be a little bit more mindful in the moment. But I want to encourage you to check those out. And if you feel so moved, and if you are able to, if you go to chickenyogi.com/tip, I have a tip jar. You are more, tips are very much appreciated and help keep the show on the air. You're also welcome to sign up for any of my free offerings. I've got a meditation that I'm doing. I'm going to be putting together kind of some gentle yoga poses, just 2 or 3 that you could do in a very limited space. I encourage you to like and follow me and check me out. And if you have any questions, I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much for listening this week. Be kind to yourself. Thank you for listening to the Chicken Yogi Show, hosted by the Chicken Yogi, Kit Kilstow. Kit's passion is creating neurodivergent liberation in all its forms through spiritual and creative mentoring. Remember who you were before you were told who you couldn't be. The Chicken Yogi Show is distributed on the Muse Charmer Network. Learn more at chickenyogi.com and subscribe to our newsletter while you're there for a free gift. Please follow the podcast at podcast.chickenyogi.com or on your favorite podcast app or platform, and check out all the shows on the Muse Charmer Network at musecharmer.com. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Music is Running with the Horses by Purple Planet Music. Their website is purple-planet.com. This show is copyright 2024, all rights reserved by the Chicken Yogi and Kit Kilstow.